The Denver Broncos will be without star-free safety Justin Simmons for at least 4 weeks after placing him on injured reserve. What's next for the Broncos defense? Who is expected to step up? And could Billy Turner be on track to make his debut in Week 2 against the Houston Texans? We discuss that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, whether you listen to your favorite audio podcasting platform or whether you watch us on YouTube. Thank you so much. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button down below so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos beat reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. Bad news for the Broncos on Wednesday as it was announced that Justin Simmons, Broncos star-free safety, will be going on injured reserve as he sustained a quad injury in the Broncos' loss to the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football. Sayre, I mean, outside of just the impact of losing a guy like Justin Simmons, who's really been the Broncos' Iron Man for the entirety of his career, I mean, this is a big blow for a defense that's hoping that they can get some of the miscommunication stuff that they've been dealing with kind of behind them, and it's going to be tough now. He's going to miss at least the next 4 games, so that means the Houston Texans on Sunday. That means the next week, the San Francisco 49ers Sunday Night Football, the Las Vegas Raiders, and then the Indianapolis Colts on a Thursday Night Football short week turnaround. Not ideal timing for this Broncos football team.
It's certainly not, Cody, and you really hope that it is just the 4-week minimum because obviously being placed on injured reserve, he is required by the NFL rules to miss 4 games. So now the Broncos have to be without Justin Simmons for a month, which stinks, but hopefully it is just that month. We know the Broncos have obviously a few big games coming up here. And then that game against the Colts is another really quick turnaround on a Thursday night game there. So there's a lot going on with the Broncos right now, Cody, but certainly, I mean, we didn't want to have to do an episode like this where we have to shift focus from talking about Houston Texans and game prep and who could stand out to, and Justin Simmons suffered a quad injury during the Seattle Seahawks game that nobody even knew about because he played through it. He played all 55 defensive snaps for the team. He's just so tough, man. Yeah. I mean, I think people kind of get it twisted a lot of times when safeties, they don't get to be around the ball every single play. Like Justin Simmons may not be in on every single play, but he's so crucial to the Broncos defense and he's been so tough. He's such a great example setter. He's such a great tone setter. And like you said, a great communicator, which to me, I think that's maybe the biggest issue here that the Broncos could be facing because now you're down Justin Simmons, who's on injured reserve, but also Josey Jewell is still coming back from that calf injury. So that's 2 primary communicators on the defensive side of the ball for the Broncos as you head into this game against the Houston Texans. Certainly not ideal.
It was a huge shock for all of us because Coach Hackett met with us in the media earlier on Wednesday, and he was going through the injury report, and he said, Justin Simmons got a quad, will not participate, and is expected to miss time. We're like, wait, what? Because after the Seahawks game, in the locker room, we were able to talk with Justin Simmons. We saw Justin Simmons. There was no indication that his quad was banged up. So it just goes to show how tough he is. But even to the point as well, it's probably one of those things where, after a game, your adrenaline's still going. And then the next day, you wake up and you're like, hey, this hurts. And so they obviously got it looked at. And with a quad injury, it's soft tissue. It's something that can re-aggravate really easily, kind of like a hamstring in a sense. And the Broncos are treating it that way. So luckily, he's not going to be out for the entirety of the season, but at least 4 weeks, which could put him on track to return for that Monday Night Football game against Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers. But timing's not ideal for this Broncos football team. That's a huge blow for them, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And Sarah, we talk about communication. There were some miscommunication issues by the defense in the Week 1 game against the Seattle Seahawks. Now you lose arguably your best communicator on the field and a guy who's your primary play caller, as you mentioned, besides Josey Jewell, who was the guy prior to his injury. Losing both these guys, if both these guys don't play, obviously Simmons is out against Houston, but Josey Jewell did not participate in Wednesday's practice, and he may not be able to play. I mean, missing those 2 guys, that's huge for the defense.
It is. It's going to be a lot of pressure on it. It looks like Alex Singleton, Cody, based on the snap counts from the different players that played against the Seattle Seahawks, it looked like Singleton played the most, which to me indicate, and I mean the most as in he played the most out of like Jonas Griffith or, other guys. So it looks to me like if he's the primary play caller, that's what could be against the Houston Texans once again. So Alex Singleton going to have to step up in a big way, but also a lot of other players on the back end of this Denver Broncos secondary. We know, I mean, the George Payton has invested heavily in the safety position, and that's going to be, it's going to pay dividends very quickly because the Broncos are going to need other guys to step up. Now, I know we're going to talk more about individually who that will be, but just in the immediate, a bigger role for Kareem Jackson, right? I mean, the other veteran on the back end of that secondary there, he's going to be counted on. He also played 100% of the snaps against the Seattle Seahawks, but we did see PJ Locke in his new number 6 jersey. He rotated in, and then you had Caden Sterns. He also rotated into the mix as well. So there's going to be a lot of pressure added to those guys this week.
Well, how does the Broncos defensive personnel shift with the injury of Justin Simmons? Did the Broncos add anybody to their roster at the safety position to help alleviate maybe the loss of Simmons for at least the next 4 weeks? We dive into that coming up here in just a moment for Broncos Country. But before we do that, let me tell you about LinkedIn. And as you gear up for fall, you need the right people to help your team and help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people that you want to hire and talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs also helps you find candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. With the injury news to Justin Simmons as he's been placed on IR, will miss the next 4 weeks. Which Broncos players can we expect to step up on the defensive side of the ball in his absence? Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in. Making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform or on YouTube. We appreciate you so much with that. Sayre, you can't replace a guy like Justin Simmons. You can only hope to maybe replicate a little bit of production amongst other people, kind of like everyone's been talking about with the Kansas City Chiefs. How do you replace Tyreek Hill? You simply can't. You can spread that production out. Luckily, the Broncos in the last couple of years in the draft with George Payton have invested in the safety position here. So the next man up who's going to be filling in and playing and starting where Justin Simmons was, that's going to be Caden Sterns, who was drafted in the 5th round of last year's NFL draft. And he had some success early on as a rookie, and he wasn't used nearly enough as I think you and I both felt and Broncos Country felt he should have been. So Caden Sterns is now going to start alongside Kareem Jackson for the Broncos on Sunday against the Houston Texans.
Well, and about 6 months ago, I think a lot of people thought it would be Caden Sterns starting alongside Justin Simmons at the start of this season because of how well he played as a rookie. But obviously, it's going to be a little bit different now and under different, and unfortunate circumstances. But like you said, it's a great opportunity for Caden Sterns to go out there and show, and I can be a full-time player in the NFL. I can be trusted. I can be relied upon, especially kind of on short notice, right? I mean, he's got to go out and he's got to prepare a completely different way this year. Going out and preparing as a dime linebacker or somebody who comes in as a situational playmaker for the defense, it's way different now having the responsibilities that Justin Simmons had on the back end. And of course, the Broncos will work to kind of mitigate that workload as much as they possibly can for him. But at the same time, you want Caden Sterns out there. You want him to be playing free. You want him to be playing not loose in a bad way, but you want him to be playing out there confident, having fun, flying around, doing the things that he does well. We know he's a fantastic athlete, Cody, and we know he's got some ball hawking skills. Remember, he picked off Zach Wilson last year. He picked off Dak Prescott last year. A really impressive play. He got a couple of sacks on Lamar Jackson as well. So definitely a lot of playmaking from Caden Sterns that we've already seen. Now we're going to finally get the opportunity to kind of see extensive snaps and him in the too high look and different things like that, playing the deep free safety spot instead of playing in the box or playing it as a matchup player. I'm excited for it, Cody. I'm not excited that Justin Simmons is injured. I hope nobody gets that twisted, but we know how people in the comment section of certain things are these days, but I'm not trying to say I'm excited about the injury, of course, but it brings opportunities for other players to come in and step up. And maybe, just maybe, when Justin Simmons comes back, maybe you kind of have to do a little thinking about, hey, do we want Caden Sterns in the lineup a little bit more? Does Kareem Jackson maybe become a part-time guy? It'll be fascinating to see, but I hope he does come in and take advantage of this opportunity in a big way.
Well, with the injury to Justin Simmons, we talked about Caden Sterns sliding into his role, but that also changes some other personnel things on the Broncos side, especially in dime, where Caden Sterns was playing against the Seattle Seahawks in the dime package. So now that means that P.J. Locke, who had an impressive preseason as well, alongside I felt Caden Sterns, he gets to slide into that dime role there. And so, I feel good about where the Broncos are at. Like, you don't feel good about losing Justin Simmons, but you feel good about the depth that they have, guys that have proven that they can step up if their number's called upon. And now, look, it's a big challenge. Not only do you have to replace, maybe not having Justin Simmons on the defense, potentially Josie Jewell, but I just think it's a great opportunity, not only just for the safeties, but for everybody on the Broncos defense this week to buckle down and say, you know what, gentlemen, we got to step up this week. We don't have Josie potentially. We don't have Justin Simmons for the next 4 weeks. We have to do it ourselves. We have to come in and we have to all come together as one unit, and we have to fly around and play mistake-free football, which, that's always a challenge because the game's played at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But I'm excited about that. But in the meantime, the Broncos did make a move as well, signing veteran safety Anthony Harris to the practice squad, elevating Asang Bassi from the practice squad to the active roster. Simmons goes on IR, and now Anthony Harris comes in and is a practice squad player alongside Delarian Turner-Yell at this point at that position. Were you a little surprised a little bit about Anthony Harris' name coming up on Wednesday for the Broncos?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see him still available at this point, right? Although a lot of veteran players that are notable kind of still are floating around there. So Anthony Harris, he had 6 interceptions back in 2019 for the Minnesota Vikings. I remember there was a lot of Broncos fans that really wanted the team to sign him before he became a franchise player for the Vikings in 2020. And then obviously when George Paton came aboard in 2021 and he was a free agent again, it kind of was another situation where it kind of made sense to maybe bring him in, but the Eagles brought him in instead. And he had a decent season statistically for the Eagles last year. Although if you search Twitter, it doesn't really seem like Eagles fans were too disappointed to see him go. So it'll be kind of one of those things that's like a break in case of emergency type of player to have out there. But I like the move, Cody. I think it's a good veteran addition. You get a guy out there to kind of protect yourself in case anything does happen to Caden Sterns. P.J. Locke out there, Delarian Turner-Yell, as you mentioned. The Broncos protected themselves well with having quite a bit of depth. I was a little surprised to see, and I know we didn't talk about this off air. We don't have this on the script either, but J.R. Reed wasn't brought back. And I don't know if he signed on with somebody else. I don't know if he's still available, but thought he had a good preseason. The Broncos decided not to bring him back, but Anthony Harris, the veteran, coming in as the fail-safe.
Well, and J.R. Reed used to play for the Houston Texans too, so it's kind of like the irony in a situation of that. I don't know if he is anywhere. Oh, yes, he is. I believe he's with the Las Vegas Raiders. He was picked up by them. Wow. It's enough. We learned something new here today. So
there you go.
Obviously no J.R. Reed there, but I think for the Broncos specifically this week, you mentioned Kareem Jackson being a guy that's going to probably be, kind of mentoring and elevating, controlling things a little bit and helping the younger guys kind of find their place defensively, especially trying to fill in for Justin Simmons. But for Kareem Jackson, once again, he gets to face his former team. The last time we saw Kareem take on his former team, he went absolutely insane. We talk about the Jeremiah Atauchu recovery of a fumble, and then he just pitched it to Kareem, who ran it in for a touchdown. Not to mention the hit on DeAndre Hopkins coming across the middle of the field. That was a very good Houston Texans team personnel-wise. They don't have the same personnel, though, in Houston now. And so the question is, like, for Kareem Jackson, how is he going to perform against his former team? We're going to see a chip on his shoulder this week.
I hope we do. See, I was thinking after that game against the Houston Texans, I was like, man, I wish the Broncos could play the Houston Texans every week after that 2019 game. Kareem Jackson was out there playing out of his mind. So hopefully he can revive that against the Texans this time around yet again. I loved seeing him play. Just that was a kind of like a all encompassing of everything that he could do as a playmaker and what he's kind of been over the course of his career. So hopefully here against his former team, we get a vintage Kareem Jackson performance. We know he's going to be out there, and he's always looking for blood in the water, isn't he, Cody? I mean, he's just that type of player. He's the heat-seeking missile, that type of thing. So Kareem Jackson, I think we can expect, especially with Justin Simmons out, he's going to turn it up. He's going to turn it on for this game. And I hope he has maybe even his best game in recent memory for the Broncos.
That would be huge for the Broncos defense here in week 2 with a showdown set for the Houston Texans, 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. As we talked about some of the bad injury news that has impacted the Broncos this week, there could be a silver lining with a key player that the Broncos acquired in the offseason who could be on track to make his debut on Sunday. We talk about Billy Turner coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro, college football, betting needs, and sports information this season. You can find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's second week games of NFL action. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores all across every major sport. They're also the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, NBA, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. The Broncos could receive a boost on the offensive line this week with Billy Turner. Could he make his debut? Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Free and available everywhere you get your podcasts or whether you watch us on YouTube. Sayre and I, we appreciate you so much out there, and hopefully all the Seahawks fans are out of our YouTube comment section at this point. Enjoy your Super Bowl win. Outside of that, could the Broncos maybe get a boost on the offensive line this week with Billy Turner maybe making his debut? Now, I think a big sign in that, Sayre, for the first time since coming off the PUP list. I mean, Billy Turner has been a guy at practice, but he's been limited to position-specific drills, no team drills. Well, on Wednesday, he was finally given the full designation by Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett, and part of me is wondering, do you bring him into week 2 against the Houston Texans for his first action, or do you roll another week once again with Cam Fleming and maybe keep Turner as a emergency worst-case scenario option in case something were to happen, in your opinion? Now, I think initially Cam Fleming, I think on the first watch being up there in the press box, there were times where we saw Uchenna Nwosu get pressure, beat him off the edge, but he didn't sack Russell Wilson. So I think that was a promising sign. He played better than I anticipated going back and watching the film. So, I mean, Sayre, if you had to make the decision, do you go with Cam Fleming another week, or do you go with Billy Turner, even though he hasn't gotten any game reps yet, or really a lot of team reps to this point?
I think it's a very interesting dilemma, Cody, because the Quinn Miners injury out with, potentially a hamstring. We don't know exactly. The Broncos didn't put him on IR, but you kind of have these two things going opposite directions here. You got Quinn Miners out with the hamstring, and you got Billy Turner coming in. And then obviously the Broncos and Nathaniel Hackett, they said that they were impressed by Cam Fleming. So especially in the run game, Cody, I think on second watch, I felt like Cam Fleming did a better job than it looked like initially just watching the broadcast of the game. But certainly it's going to provide for them an interesting dilemma, because the fact that Cam Fleming started against the Seahawks in the first place kind of indicated to me that Billy Turner was their number one option at right tackle, because we kind of thought all offseason that, well, it's either Cam Fleming or it's not Cam Fleming, but it's either Calvin Anderson or Billy Turner at right tackle. So when Calvin Anderson wasn't out there, you kind of feel like, okay, well, clearly the Broncos wanted it to be Billy Turner, but Cam Fleming is the backup option at the right side. So I'll be fascinated to see, because the injury to Quinn Miners kind of complicates things. That could allow you to move Billy Turner to guard. It could allow you to move Cam Fleming inside to guard if you want. Obviously, Graham Glasgow was out there, but are the Broncos more confident in Billy Turner and Cam Fleming on the right side, or some combination of those two? Or are they more confident with Graham Glasgow being out there with Billy Turner, when both of those guys have kind of been practicing with, Graham was with the second unit all offseason, and then Billy obviously wasn't practicing at all. It'll be fun to see, because I think the Broncos offensive line played pretty well for the most part in this game, and they did a good job, especially in the running game. There was clearer running lanes, Cody, to me, against the Seahawks than we saw pretty much all last year. So I felt like the Broncos running game had an opportunity for great success, especially with Billy Turner out there in the lineup. But even when he wasn't out there, they did well. So I think they have kind of it's not an embarrassment of riches per se, but then you still have Netani Muti on the practice squad as well that you could think about as a right guard option. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Well, we'll see. Broncos country, would you like to see Billy Turner make his debut? And if he does, would you like to see him get the start at right tackle for the Broncos on Sunday against the Houston Texans, 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff? Some other injury news and notes, though, from the Broncos on Wednesday. Randy Gregory, KJ Hamler among players. Other players that did not participate, KJ Hamler with the knee and the hip, Randy Gregory with the shoulder and the knee. But this is more so, in my opinion, nothing new. This was more so kind of a combination of what was going on last week. They just played in their first game after the injuries, after the surgeries that they had, and so I think it was more so kind of like a rest day in a sense in terms of DNP. So we'll see if on Thursday, Friday, and even Saturday's walkthrough if these guys participate in practice. But I will say Randy Gregory during the team stretch period on Wednesday was out there with his jersey on, didn't have his helmet, but was going through stretch. So that tells me he's probably going to be fine in this case in point here for this Broncos team. But obviously, injury is never a good thing for the Broncos, never good for any NFL team, and the Broncos are going to have to find a way to fight through some adversity. As Russell Wilson even said, too, one thing that he said great teams, championship teams have, they have to have the ability to develop adversity tolerance. So we'll see if the Broncos can digest some adversity tolerance here in the next couple of weeks without Justin Simmons there. We've recapped, obviously, the impact of his injury, what it means to the Broncos defense. Players like Caden Sterns and P.J. Locke, who are now expected to step up and have a bigger role in the defense in his absence. Plus, we also talked about Billy Turner potentially making his debut this Sunday. You got that on all of the action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. But with that said, that will wrap up today's episode of the show. Tomorrow's episode, Lockdown Broncos, features a crossover Thursday special. I sat down with Cody Davis, host of the Lockdown Texans podcast, to break down the matchups, key matchups that we're looking for on both sides of the ball, what the Broncos need to do if they want to come out on top with a victory, and also what's the biggest storyline for the Broncos so far heading into the week. Well, we talked about it with the injury to Justin Simmons. You get that on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.